A man abandoned his own wife in a wheelchair inside an enclosure with a wild horse asterisk. It wasn't carelessness, it was calculated coldness. Asterisk. But what he didn't expect was that the animal would react in a completely opposite way to what he had planned. Asterisk. You won't believe what happened next. An emotional story that will move you. Asterisk. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Asterisk. I promise, this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. Sarah Thompson always loved teaching. In the small town of Oak Ridge Valley in rural Virginia, she was known as the teacher who transformed lives. With her gentle and determined manner, she had dedicated 20 years of her life to the county school, teaching generations of children in a region where education was the only path to a better future. Asterisk. The school was 15 miles from her farm, a simple but welcoming place she had inherited from her parents. Every day Sarah traveled the winding road through the mountains, appreciating the landscape she loved so much. It was on one of these roads, during a violent storm, that her life changed forever. Asterisk. The accident happened in the blink of an eye. A landslide, the road disappearing, the car spinning through the air. When she woke up in the hospital days later, Sarah received the news that would paralyze more than her legs. She would never walk again. Asterisk. By her side during recovery was Richard, her husband of 15 years. A farmer from a traditional family in the region, he had always been a man of few words. But in the early years of marriage, his silence was comfortable, like a quiet embrace. After the accident, however, something changed in his gaze. The silence, once welcoming, became cold, distant. "You'll overcome this," he would say without emotion, while pushing her wheelchair through the hospital corridors. "Our life will continue normally." Asterisk. But nothing continued normally. Back at the farm, Sarah found a husband transformed by frustration. The necessary adaptations to the house seemed to irritate him. The daily care she required was met with impatient sighs. In the quiet nights, she could hear him drinking more than usual, grumbling about interrupted plans, about the burden he carried. "You were always so independent, Sarah," he commented one night, alcohol making his words more sincere and cruel. "Look at you now." Sariska, the woman who once commanded a classroom with serene authority, now shrank at every cutting word. Visits from former students became rare, not for lack of affection, but because Richard received them with barely disguised contempt. Gradually, isolation settled like a dense fog over the farm. Asterisk. It was during this dark period that Sarah found unexpected solace. In the back of the property, in a half-abandoned stable, lived Tempest, a black horse of imposing stature that Richard had bought years before to show at regional fairs. The animal, known for its difficult temperament, had never been completely tamed. Richard had tried to sell it several times, but its reputation for being uncontrollable kept buyers away. Asterisk. One particularly lonely afternoon, when Richard had gone to town on business, Sarah asked Walter, the only employee left on the farm, to take her to the stable. "Mrs. Sarah, that beast is dangerous," warned the old foreman, concerned. "Even the boss can't get near it properly." "I just want to look at something alive that doesn't look at me with pity or contempt, Walter," she replied, with a sad smile. Asterisk. Reluctantly, the man took her. He positioned the wheelchair at a safe distance and went to fetch fresh water for the troughs. Sarah was left alone, observing the majestic animal that seemed as out of place as she was in that environment. Asterisk. Tempest approached the fence, his nostrils dilated with curiosity. Sarah felt a shiver of fear, but didn't back away. There was something in those dark, deep eyes that intrigued her. It wasn't the fury everyone described, but an almost palpable loneliness. "You don't fit in either, do you?" she murmured, extending her hesitant hand to the other side of the fence. Asterisk. To her surprise, the horse came closer. His muzzle gently touched Sarah's fingers in a gesture that almost seemed like a greeting. In that fleeting moment, something inexplicable happened. A silent connection between two misunderstood beings. Asterisk. From that day on, Sarah visited Tempest whenever she could. She carried carrots and apples hidden in her pockets, talked to him about the empty days, about the pains that consumed her, about Richard's growing coldness. The horse listened with an almost human attention, as if he understood every word. "I think I found a friend, Walter," she confided to the foreman, who observed the unlikely friendship with amazement. "It's strange, isn't it? The animal, everyone. Fears is the only one that makes me feel strong again." Walter, who had served the family for decades, just nodded with an enigmatic smile. "Sometimes animals see what men can't see, Mrs. Sarah." What none of them knew was that Richard was watching those visits with growing displeasure. The proximity between his wife and the animal he had never managed to tame seemed like a personal affront, a daily reminder of his own inabilities. **1. Autumn evening? During a silent dinner illuminated only by the yellowish light of an old lamp, Richard finally verbalized what had been growing inside him like a weed. "We need to talk about the future, Sarah," he said, cutting the meat with methodical precision. "This situation can't continue." "What situation?" she asked, her heart accelerating. "With a dark premonition. This life, you, me, this farm that's sinking in debt, I can't manage everything alone anymore, and you—" He paused, his eyes avoiding hers. "You've become a burden I can no longer carry." The words hit Sarah like a slap. She had felt the distance, had noticed the growing resentment, but hearing the raw truth, stripped of any compassion, was different. It was final. "What are you suggesting, Richard?" Her voice came out firmer than she expected, a distant echo of the confident teacher she once was. "My cousin in Boston has a clinic, a place for people like you. It would be better for everyone." "Oh, nursing home? Is that what you want? To get rid of me like discarding an old piece of furniture?" Richard sighed, as if he were the victim of the situation. "I'm being practical, Sarah. You always admired practicality." That night, lying in the bed she had once shared with love, Sarah cried silently. The tears weren't for the cruelty of Richard's words, but for the realization that the man she had loved had completely disappeared. Through the half-open window, she could hear Tempest's distant whinny, as if the animal sensed her anguish through the night. It was at this moment, between tears and with a broken heart, that Sarah made a decision. She would not go to any clinic. She would not be discarded as something useless. Somehow, she would find strength to rebuild her life, even if she had to. Start from scratch. What she didn't know was that Richard had already drawn up his own plan, a dark plan that involved both her and Tempest. And that would forever change the fate of everyone at Oak Ridge Valley Farm. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of raised voices. She dragged herself to the wheelchair and made her way with difficulty to the porch. There she found Walter, gesturing nervously to Richard, who maintained an impassive expression. "You can't do this, Mr. Richard. It's cruelty." "He's my animal and I'll do what I want with him." "It's already decided." Sarah interrupted the discussion. "What's happening?" Both men turned, surprised by her presence. Walter lowered his eyes, while Richard stared at her with calculated coldness. "Tempest will be sold to a slaughterhouse. I received an offer yesterday." The world seemed to spin under Sarah's chair. "No, you can't do that." "I can and I will. That animal never served any purpose, just consumes feed and space. Just like—" He interrupted the sentence, but the poison was already in the air. Richard's threat hung in the air like a heavy cloud. It wasn't just about Tempest, it was about her too. The unspoken words weighed more than those pronounced. Sarah felt a chill down her spine as she realized the depth of the contempt that now inhabited the heart of the man who had once vowed to love her in sickness and in health. "Please, Richard, please." "Don't do this," Sarah pleaded, her voice almost a whisper. "Tempest is the only what? A useless horse that only serves to drain our resources, just as you drain mine." The venom in his words finally overflowed, revealing what he had been keeping inside for months. Walter intervened, indignant. "Mr. Richard, you can't talk to Mrs. Sarah like that." "Mind your own business, old man. Or would you prefer to look for employment elsewhere? The threat was enough to silence the foreman, who walked away with clenched fists of impotence. That afternoon, while Richard went out to meet the slaughterhouse buyer, Sarah asked Walter to take her to the stable one last time. The old foreman, with tears in his eyes, obeyed. He positioned the wheelchair near the fence and stepped away to give her privacy, promising to return in half an hour. "Come." "Tempest," called Sarah, her voice choked with emotion. The black horse approached with his usual elegance. There was something different in his eyes that day, an almost supernatural understanding of the situation. Sarah extended her hand, feeling the velvety muzzle touch her fingers with delicacy. "I'm sorry," she murmured, letting the tears flow freely. "I failed you, I failed myself." Tempest whinnied softly as if responding. On impulse, Sarah opened the gate to the enclosure. She wanted to feel the animal closer, wanted to hug his strong neck one last time. The horse entered the small space where she was, approaching with surprising care for an animal of his size. It was at this moment that the unexpected happened. Instead of keeping a safe distance, Tempest knelt in front of her, in a position that trainers would call impossible for an untrained horse. It was as if he was offering his back. "What are you doing?" asked Sarah, amazed. The animal remained motionless, waiting. With her heart racing, Sarah understood the silent invitation. Using all the strength in her arms, she managed to lift herself from the chair and, in a painful but determined movement, positioned herself on the animal's back. Tempest rose slowly, with an almost human care not to unbalance her. And then, something magical happened. With Sarah firmly grasping his mane, the horse began to walk around the small enclosure, slowly at first, then with more confidence. The sensation was indescribable. After months confined to a chair, Sarah felt free again, part of something greater than her physical limitation. "Incredible," murmured a male voice. Startled, Sarah turned to find an unknown man observing her. From the fence, tall, with graying hair and a penetrating gaze, he was watching her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said, approaching. "I'm Nathan Foster, veterinarian. I came to examine an animal at the neighboring farm and got lost. I heard a whinny and thought I'd ask for directions." Sarah blushed, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. A woman in simple clothes, disheveled hair, mounted without a saddle on a horse inside a small enclosure. "You shouldn't be in there," continued the man, his tone professional, but gentle. "That animal seems nervous and unstable." "Tempest isn't dangerous," Sarah defended, stroking the horse's neck. "At least not with me." Nathan came closer, intrigued. "I've never seen anything like this. The connection between you is extraordinary, especially considering... He didn't complete the sentence, but his eyes lingered on the empty wheelchair in the corner of the enclosure. Sarah felt her face burn. "Considering I'm an invalid?" she completed, with a hint of bitterness. "Considering horses rarely demonstrate this level of empathy without extensive training," he corrected gently. "What I'm seeing here is exceptional from a behavioral standpoint." At that moment, Walter returned, alarmed to see the scene. "Mrs. Sarah, for heaven's sake, and you, sir, who are you?" After quick explanations and the help of both men to return to the chair, Sarah learned more about the unexpected visitor. Nathan was a veterinarian, specialized in equines. Respected in the region for his work with animals considered beyond recovery. He had developed rehabilitation techniques that integrated physical and behavioral care. "What will happen to this animal?" asked Nathan, while examining Tempest with skilled hands. Sarah hesitated, the pain evident in her eyes. "My husband sold him to a slaughterhouse. The buyer is coming to get him tomorrow." Nathan frowned, indignant. "That's criminal. This horse is a rare specimen with extraordinary emotional intelligence. It would be like destroying a work of art." "I can't do anything," replied Sarah, the powerlessness weighing in every word. I no longer have a voice in this house. The veterinarian observed her for a long time, as if evaluating something beyond what he saw. Maybe I can help, he said finally. I know people who could interfere, authorities that... No, interrupted Sarah, frightened. Richard has influence in the region. Any interference would only make things worse. For me and for Tempest. Nathan nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. Before leaving, he handed her a card. If you change your mind or if you need anything, call this number, day or night. That night was the longest in Sarah's life. Lying in bed, she listened to Richard's snores beside her, while her mind worked feverishly. The husband's cruel words mixed with the image of Tempest being taken away, with the gentleness in Nathan's eyes, with Walter's silent desperation. For the first time in many months, something beyond resignation grew inside her. It was a spark of rebellion, a burning desire to fight, not just for the horse but for herself. In the early morning, she made her decision. Careful not to wake Richard, she dragged herself to the wheelchair and silently made her way to the office. There she rummaged through the drawers until she found what she was looking for. The farm documents, her parents' will, the property. Records. She confirmed what she already knew. The farm was her inheritance, not Richard's. Their marriage with partial community property guaranteed that. In the early hours, while the house still slept, Sarah made a phone call. Dr. Nathan? It's Sarah Thompson. I need your help. The plan was quickly developed. Nathan contacted connections in the Department of Agriculture and the Regional Veterinary Medicine Council. An anonymous complaint about animal abuse resulted in a surprise inspection visit, exactly when the slaughterhouse buyer arrived at the farm. Richard was caught off guard. The presence of the inspectors, accompanied by a court officer with a preliminary notification, transformed his usual arrogance into poorly disguised nervousness. There's been a misunderstanding, he tried to explain as the inspectors examined the facilities and the animal's documentation. This horse is problematic, dangerous. I'm just making a business decision. An animal of this size and breed requires specific documentation for transport and slaughter, the inspector coldly explained. Additionally, we've received complaints about the maintenance conditions that we need to verify. While the inspection proceeded, Sarah remained on the porch, watching everything with her heart pounding. By her side, discreetly, was Nathan. Will it work? She asked in a whisper. Temporarily, he replied. We've bought time, but we need a permanent solution. Your husband won't give up easily. The slaughterhouse buyer, irritated with the confusion and unexpected bureaucracy, ended up abandoning the deal. The inspectors issued a series of warnings about the inadequate conditions of the stables and the need for immediate measures. When everyone left, Richard turned to Sarah, his face contorted with fury. It was you, wasn't it? You did this. Sarah faced his gaze with a calmness she didn't feel. I did what any decent person would do, Richard. I prevented an unnecessary cruelty. You don't understand, we're drowning in debt. That animal is worth money. This farm belonged to my parents, replied Sarah, her voice firm. Every tree, every animal, every piece of land. I allowed you to manage everything because I trusted you. That time is over. Richard's expression changed from anger to disbelief. What are you saying? I'm saying I want a divorce, Richard, and I want my farm back. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard stared at her as if seeing a stranger. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes, not of the wife in a wheelchair, but of the determined woman who was rising from the ashes of her former submission. You couldn't manage this place even when you had legs, he scoffed, in a last attempt to intimidate her. How do you think you're going to do it now? I won't be alone, replied Sarah, indicating with a gesture the figure of Nathan, who remained discreetly at a distance. There are people willing to help without asking for anything in return, a concept you never understood, Richard. Night. Richard slept in the office. Sarah, alone in the bed she had shared for so many years, felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had taken the first step toward her liberation, but she knew the road would be long and difficult. Richard wouldn't easily give up the farm, or the control he exercised over her asterisk. The next morning, upon waking, she found a surprise. On the bedside table was an envelope. Inside, a handwritten document, a statement from Walter detailing years of financial misconduct by Richard, undeclared cattle sales, illicit negotiations with loggers in the region. The old foreman had always known everything, always kept meticulous records, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. "Why? Didn't you tell me before?" asked Sarah when she found Walter later in the barn. Asterisk. The old man lowered his eyes, ashamed. "The boss threatened me, Mrs. Sarah. Said he'd throw me out without references, that nobody would believe an uneducated old man against a respected man like him. And I needed the job." Asterisk Sarah pressed the foreman's wrinkled hand between hers. "I understand, Walter, and I thank you for your courage now." Asterisk, with the evidence in hand, Sarah had a powerful weapon for the legal battle that approached. But before she could decide how to use it, a new event changed the course of the story. Asterisk. Late that afternoon, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in orange hues, an official car parked at the farm entrance. From it descended two men in suits and an elegant middle-aged woman, whose posture and resemblance to Richard immediately revealed her relationship. "Sarah," the woman introduced herself, extending her hand. "I'm Rebecca Harrington, Richard's cousin. We need to talk." Asterisk. The farm office, previously Richard's exclusive territory, now hosted a tense meeting. Sarah, in her wheelchair, carefully observed her husband's cousin, a woman of striking presence, impeccably arranged brown hair, and penetrating eyes that seemed to assess every detail of the environment. "This situation is unacceptable," declared Rebecca after hearing Sarah's account of the past few months. "Richard always had selfish tendencies, but I never imagined he would reach this point." Asterisk. The two men accompanying her, a lawyer and an accountant, remained silent, occasionally taking notes. Nathan, whom Sarah had invited to be present, remained discreetly by her side, a comforting presence amid that family confrontation. "Why do you care?" questioned Sarah, still suspicious of the visitor's intentions. "From what I know, you and Richard were never close." Asterisk. Rebecca sighed, a shadow of sadness crossing her aristocratic face. "We're from the same family, but we've followed very different paths. While Richard chose to live off traditions and the family name, I built my own story." Asterisk. She paused, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I'm a federal judge in Boston, Sarah, specialized in human rights. I came because I received concerning information about the situation here." "Information? From whom?" Asterisk. Rebecca exchanged a quick glance with Nathan, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Sarah felt her heart accelerate, understanding the hidden connection. "You know him," she concluded, looking at the veterinarian with new understanding. "Nathan and I have known each other for many years," confirmed Rebecca. "He works as a consultant in animal abuse cases that come to my court. When he learned he was in the region and discovered your situation, he got in touch." Asterisk. Sarah turned to Nathan, feeling slightly betrayed. "You planned all this from the beginning. Is that why you, coincidentally, appeared that day?" "Not exactly," he replied, his honest gaze meeting hers. "I really was working at the neighboring farm. The encounter was a coincidence, but after seeing how Richard treated you and Tempest, I felt I needed to do something." "And the animal abuse complaint? Was that yours too?" Asterisk. Nathan nodded. "It was just to buy time. I knew we needed a more decisive intervention. And here we are," completed Rebecca, retaking control of the conversation. "Sarah, what Richard did, the emotional abandonment, the veiled threats, the attempt to appropriate your assets, constitutes patrimonial and psychological violence. These are forms of abuse covered by the Violence Against Women Act. Asterisk. The mention of the law made Sarah shudder. She had never considered herself a victim of domestic violence. In her mind, this type of abuse always involved physical aggression, shouting, direct threats. What she had experienced with Richard was more subtle, more insidious, a slow crumbling of her self-esteem, a gradual imprisonment in her own home. "I don't want to expose my life in a courtroom," she murmured, suddenly aware of the dimension everything could take. "I don't want to be seen as pitiful a victim." "I understand your fear," replied Rebecca with gentleness, "but there are discreet ways to resolve this. My presence here isn't official. I came as family. However, if necessary, I can activate legal mechanisms to protect you." At that moment, the office door abruptly opened. Richard entered, his face contorted in a mask of indignation at seeing the meeting happening in his absence. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice oscillating between surprise and hostility. "Hello, cousin," she replied with studied calm. "We were just talking about you and your recent decisions." Richard shot a furious look at Sarah. "I see you've been making new friends and spreading lies about me." "They're not lies, Richard," intervened Nathan, standing up. "We have witnesses and documents that prove your actions. And who are you to meddle in my life in my house?" "This is not your house," corrected Sarah, finding a firmness in her voice that she hadn't felt in months. "As I already told you, this farm belongs to my family. It was my parents' inheritance." Richard let out a dry laugh devoid of humor. "A property you can't manage alone. Look at yourself, Sarah. You need help even to take a bath. How do you intend to take care of an entire farm?" The silence that followed was cutting. The cruel words hung in the air like suspended daggers. Sarah felt the familiar knot in her throat, humiliation burning her face. But this time, something different happened. Instead of shrinking, she raised her chin. "I don't need to do everything alone, Richard. Unlike you, I know when I need help, and I'm not ashamed to ask for it." Rebecca intervened, her voice calm but authoritative. "Richard, I suggest you sit down and participate civilly in this conversation. We're here to find a solution that respects everyone's rights." Reluctantly, he took a seat at a distance, keeping his arms crossed in a defensive posture. The lawyer accompanying Rebecca then presented a proposal, a divorce agreement with equitable division of assets acquired during the marriage, keeping the farm as Sarah's exclusive property. "This is absurd," protested Richard. "I dedicated 15 years of my life to this place. I improved every acre, modernized the production. I'm entitled to half of everything." "Actually, cousin," replied Rebecca with a thin smile, "considering the evidence of resource misappropriation that Walter kindly provided us, you can consider yourself fortunate. We're not discussing this in a criminal court." The mention of the foreman's documents made the blood drain from Richard's face. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "You wouldn't do this to me," he muttered between clenched teeth. "Wouldn't do what, Richard? Defend. What's mine? Protect what's left of my dignity?" Sarah's voice trembled, not from fear, but from a controlled anger that finally found expression. "You plan to get rid of me and Tempest as if we were useless burdens. Who betrayed whom first?" The meeting continued for hours, with heated discussions about every detail of the agreement. In the end, exhausted and cornered by the evidence against him, Richard ended up yielding. He would receive less financial compensation than he expected, but enough to start over elsewhere. In exchange, he would waive any future claim on the farm. When everyone left, finally leaving Sarah alone, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The legal battle was practically won, but now she faced an even greater challenge, rebuilding her life, managing the property, finding a new purpose. The next morning, Richard left without goodbyes. He took only his clothes and personal items, leaving behind 15 years of a shared life that ended not with tears, but with signed documents and cold agreements. Sarah watched the car move away down the dirt road, feeling a strange lightness. Beside her, Tempest grazed peacefully, as if he too understood that a new phase was beginning. "And now?" asked Nathan, who had remained at the farm to assist with the transition. "What are your plans?" Sarah contemplated the vastness of her property, the green pastures, the stables that needed repairs, the big house that was once again hers alone. An idea that had been germinating in silence finally took shape. "I want to transform this place," she replied, her eyes shining with renewed purpose. "Not just into a productive farm, but into a sanctuary, a refuge for rescued, abandoned, mistreated animals." Nathan smiled, genuinely admiring her vision. "It will be a huge challenge." "I know, but after what I've been through, after what Tempest and I have overcome together, I believe we are capable of welcoming other stories of resilience." In the following weeks, Oak Ridge Valley Farm began its transformation. With Nathan's guidance, who had accepted the invitation to be the veterinarian responsible for the future sanctuary, Sarah developed a viable business plan. A part of the property would continue dedicated to traditional cattle raising, generating income to sustain the larger project. Rebecca, fulfilling her promise of support, mobilized contacts in Boston. Soon donations began to arrive, equipment for adapting the stables, ramps to facilitate Sarah's access to different areas of the farm, material for building new enclosures. The first rescued animal arrived on a rainy winter afternoon, an elderly mare with light coat found abandoned on a side road. Thin and frightened, with signs of mistreatment on her back, she could barely walk. "Do you think we'll be able to save her?" asked Sarah to Nathan as they watched the animal receiving initial care. "Physically, yes," he replied, with the realism of one who knew the chances well. "But lost trust is harder to restore." Sarah smiled thoughtfully. "I know exactly how she feels. Maybe that's why we can understand each other." In the following days, a routine was established. Sarah spent hours beside the mare whom she had named Hope. She talked to her, offered sliced apples in the palm of her hand, read aloud the book she used to use in her classes. Slowly, something extraordinary began to happen. Hope, initially skittish to any contact, began to eagerly await Sarah's visits. Tempest, in turn, assumed an unexpected role. He approached the newcomer with delicacy, as if inviting her to integrate into that new world. "It's incredible," commented Nathan, after observing the three together. "Tempest seems to understand the purpose of this place even before we finish building it." News of an animal sanctuary emerging in the traditional livestock region soon spread. Divided reactions arose in the community. Some applauded the initiative, seeing it as an advance in the humane treatment of animals. Others, old guard breeders, were skeptical of the project's viability and questioned the waste of fertile land. Among the most vocal critics was Robert Sterling, owner of the largest farm in the region and an old friend of Richard's. In a casual encounter at the county agricultural cooperative, he approached Sarah with false cordiality. "I heard about your new project," he commented, barely disguising his disdain. "An interesting idea, no doubt, but I fear you underestimate the challenges of managing a property of this size, especially in your condition." Sarah held his gaze, remembering how many times that same man had frequented her home, eaten at her table, praised her skills as a hostess. How quickly the mask of civility fell when power changed hands. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Sterling," she replied with studied calm, "but I'm sure I'll be able to manage my inheritance as well as you manage yours." The man narrowed his eyes, catching the underlying message. Everyone in the region knew the rumors about how the Sterling family had expanded their empire, absorbing land from small, indebted owners through questionable maneuvers. Richard was a man of vision. He insisted, slightly changing tactics. He understood the needs of the market, the trends in agribusiness. "It's a shame that you diverged." "Richard's only vision was his own interest," retorted Sarah, beginning to lose patience. "And as for market trends, Mr. Sterling, perhaps you should research the growth of sustainable rural tourism and the demand for ethically sourced products. The future may be different than we imagine." Before he could respond, Nathan approached. Having observed the interaction from a distance, he introduced himself formally, his professional and confident posture making it clear that Sarah was not. Alone? Robert Sterling backed away, saying goodbye with forced formality, but the look he gave them both contained a veiled promise that that conversation would not be the last. 6 months had passed since Richard's departure. Oak Ridge Valley Farm had been profoundly transformed. What was once just a dream now took concrete form among the verdant hills of Virginia. The old stables, renovated and adapted, housed dozens of rescued animals, horses, donkeys, goats, sheep, and even some elderly cows saved from slaughterhouses. A rustic sign, carved in reclaimed wood by local artisans, announced at the entrance to the property, Oak Ridge Valley Sanctuary, where stories are rewritten. Below the name, a stylized silhouette of Sarah in her wheelchair, side by side with Tempest, had become the symbol of the place. On that sunny spring morning, Sarah observed from the adapted porch the unusual movement. Volunteers came and went, carrying bales of hay, buckets of water, cleaning tools. Children ran happily between the enclosures, some accompanied by teachers taking notes in small notebooks. "Our first official visit from a school," commented Nathan, approaching with 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to Sarah and sat beside her. The principal said she's never seen the students so excited about a field trip. Sarah smiled, savoring the comforting aroma of the coffee. Who would have thought that crazy idea I had after Richard left would turn into this? Oak Ridge Valley Sanctuary had become more than a refuge for mistreated animals. It was now an educational center, where schools from the region brought their students to learn about respect for animals, sustainability, and resilience. Sarah's story, the teacher who lost the use of her legs, faced abandonment by her husband and found a new purpose, inspired everyone who knew the place. Caroline asked if she can give her science class in the goat enclosure today, commented Nathan, referring to the young biology teacher who had become a regular volunteer on weekends. "I think she wants to show the students how Matilda overcame malnutrition." "Of course she can," replied Sarah, remembering the deplorable state in which the goat had arrived 3 months earlier, rescued from a property where she was kept chained and without adequate food. "It's amazing how she recovered." A small smile played on Nathan's lips. "Just like you." The comment hung in the air, loaded with unspoken meanings. In the past few months, the relationship between Sarah and Nathan had evolved beyond professional partnership. They shared not only daily work at the sanctuary, but also deep conversations on starry nights at the farm, laughter during community lunches with volunteers, comfortable silences on Sunday afternoons. "I still have a long way to go," she replied, finally looking at her immobile legs. "Physically, at least." Nathan covered her hand with his, a gesture that had become frequent between them. "The physical therapy is showing results, Sarah. Dr. Lisa said sensitivity is gradually returning." It was true. With part of the resources from donations and the support of a university from the capital, Sarah had been able to start an experimental treatment for spinal cord injuries. Twice a week, Dr. Lisa, a physical therapist specialized in neurological rehabilitation, came to the farm for intensive sessions. Progress was slow, almost imperceptible to untrained eyes, but it was there. Small tinglings, sensations of heat and cold, involuntary spasms that didn't exist before. "I don't want to create expectations," replied Sarah with the caution of someone who had already known too many disappointments. "If this is my condition forever, I've learned to live with it. The important thing is that I've managed to recover my autonomy, my voice." Nathan nodded, respecting her realism. It was one of the qualities he most admired in her, the ability to accept reality without letting it define her. "We have visitors," he alerted, pointing to a car approaching on the dirt road. Sarah immediately recognized the official vehicle. "Rebecca is back." The judge had become a frequent presence at the sanctuary, not only as a legal supporter of the project, but as a personal friend of Sarah's. Her legal knowledge and influence in official circles had been fundamental in overcoming the bureaucratic, Obstacles that had arisen along the way. Asterisk. This time, however, Rebecca didn't come alone. From the car also emerged two men in suits, carrying folders and photographic equipment. Their serious countenances indicated this wasn't a casual visit. Sarah greeted Rebecca after climbing the porch ramp. Her eyes, normally serene, conveyed concern. "We need to talk. It's about Robert Sterling." Asterisk. The name made Sarah instantly stiffen. In the past few weeks, the neighboring farmer had intensified his campaign against the sanctuary. First came formal complaints to the county about the supposed noise of the animals, then questions about the operating license for educational activities. Finally, a lawsuit alleging that the use of the property for non-agricultural purposes violated the rural zoning of the region. "What has he done now?" asked Sarah. Preparing herself for another battle. Asterisk. Rebecca sat down, gesturing for the men to wait. "He got a partial injunction. The local county judge, an old hunting buddy, as we discovered, ordered the suspension of school visits until a complete inspection is conducted." Asterisk. Sarah felt her blood freeze. Without the school visits, not only would the educational aspect of the project be compromised, but also a significant part of the revenue that kept the sanctuary functioning. "That's why I brought these gentlemen," continued Rebecca, indicating the waiting men. "They're independent experts from the Department of Agriculture and the Regional Veterinary Medicine Council. They'll conduct an official inspection today, which will allow us to contest the injunction with solid technical arguments." Asterisk. Nathan, who had remained silent until then, intervened. "We're prepared for any inspection. Our facilities follow all animal welfare and safety protocols." "It's not just that," continued Rebecca, her tone becoming more serious. "We've received information that Sterling is planning something more drastic. He's been buying land around the farm, strategically, surrounding it. And there are rumors about attempts to contaminate the stream that supplies the property." "That's criminal," exclaimed Sarah, horrified. "He would risk the animals' lives just to force me to sell." "Ambition and revenge are powerful motivations," replied Rebecca. "Richard was his ally in regional negotiations. With his departure, Sterling lost influence over these lands. And more importantly, your project represents values opposite to his, conservation versus predatory exploitation." Asterisk. The inspection proceeded throughout the day. The experts toured each facility, photographed documents, interviewed staff and volunteers. At the end, they gathered again on the porch to present their preliminary findings. "I must say, Mrs. Thompson, that I'm impressed," declared the oldest of the experts, a gentleman with graying hair and a penetrating gaze. "In 20 years evaluating rural properties, I have rarely seen facilities so adequate for their intended purpose." Asterisk. The second expert nodded, adding, "The rehabilitation protocol developed by Dr. Foster is innovative. I believe it could serve as a model for other similar initiatives in the country." Asterisk. An invisible weight seemed to lift from Sarah's shoulders. The official approval of the experts would greatly strengthen her position in the legal dispute. However, Sterling's threat to the farm's water resources remained like a shadow over the future. "What do we do now?" she asked Rebecca after the experts departed. "We counterattack," replied the judge with determination. "We'll request a protective measure for the stream based on environmental preservation laws. And I have an idea that could neutralize Sterling definitively." Asterisk. That night, after a strategic meeting that extended until late, Sarah couldn't sleep. She put on a robe over her nightgown and directed her wheelchair to the porch, seeking in the starry sky the serenity that eluded her. Asterisk. She was so absorbed in thoughts that she didn't immediately notice the headlights approaching on the dirt road. When she finally noticed, it was too late to hide. An unknown vehicle parked in front of the house, and from it descended a familiar figure she hadn't seen in months. "Richard," she murmured, incredulous. Asterisk. Her ex-husband climbed the porch steps with the familiarity of someone who knew every board. He seemed thinner, older, his face marked by lines of concern that weren't there before. "We need to talk, Sarah," he said without preamble. "It's about Sterling." Sarah's immediate distrust must have been evident on her face, for Richard raised his hands in an appeasing gesture. I'm not here to cause problems. On the contrary, I came to warn you. Reluctantly, she allowed him to sit. She remained silent, waiting for him to explain his unexpected presence. Robert contacted me 2 weeks ago, began Richard, looking at his own hands. He offered a partnership to recover the farm, as he put it. His plan is to force you to sell using all possible means. Why are you telling me this? Why should I believe you? Richard sighed deeply. Because despite everything that happened between us, the terrible man I became, I can't go along with what he's planning. Not against you. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of falsehood. She found only exhaustion and something that seemed genuinely like remorse. What exactly is he planning? The contamination of the stream is just the beginning. He has contacts at the regional bank who could make your financing difficult, and there are other, less subtle tactics. A heavy silence settled between them. The implications hung in the night air like a tangible threat. Why are you doing this, Richard? Why help me now? He took time to respond, as if searching for the right words. I saw what you built here, Sarah. News about the sanctuary reached Boston. I saw your name. In the papers, saw the photos of the recovered animals, of the children learning. He paused. I saw that you succeeded, even after everything I said would be impossible. There was a painful sincerity in his voice that Sarah couldn't ignore. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, the man before her was the Richard she had known in the beginning, before the bitterness, before the resentment. This doesn't erase what you did, she replied finally. I know. I didn't come seeking forgiveness, Sarah. I came to do what I should have done from the beginning. Support you, not destroy you. The next morning, an extraordinary meeting was convened in the farm office. Rebecca, Nathan, Sarah, and, to everyone's surprise, Richard, discussed the strategy to follow. The ex-husband's offer of help included something invaluable: documents proving Sterling's illegal practices on his properties, from unauthorized deforestation to labor in conditions analogous to slavery. How did you get this? Asked Rebecca, examining the papers with expert eyes. I worked with him for years, replied Richard. I know his methods, his weak points, the people he has harmed along the way. With this evidence in hand, the strategy changed. Instead of just defending, the sanctuary would go on the attack. A formal complaint would be presented to the district attorney, accompanied by a complete dossier on Sterling's practices. While the others finalized the legal details, Sarah called Richard for a private conversation in the adapted garden she had created next to the house. Why did you really come back? She asked, looking him directly in the eyes. The truth, Richard. He turned his gaze to the distant mountains, breathing deeply the morning air. In Boston, I found what I thought I wanted: freedom, a new life. But I discovered I was trapped in a different prison, the prison of regret. He turned to face her. I don't expect us to go back to what we were, Sarah. That time has passed. But I would like to be able to sleep at night knowing I did at least one right thing, helping to protect what you've built here. Sarah nodded, accepting his explanation. There was no complete forgiveness in her heart, not yet, perhaps there never would be. But there was understanding, and that for now was enough. In the following weeks, the complaint against Sterling caused a regional earthquake. Federal inspectors raided his properties, discovering violations even more serious than those documented by Richard. The farmer was detained preventively, and his attempts at retaliation against the sanctuary immediately ceased. The injunction against school visits was overturned, and a new, more comprehensive license ensured the legal operation of all educational activities at Oak Ridge Valley. More importantly, an environmental protection term was established for the stream and the entire spring area of the property. On a sunny summer afternoon, exactly 1 year after the beginning of the sanctuary, Sarah observed the preparations for the celebration ceremony. A white tent had been erected in the central field, chairs arranged in a semicircle. A small local television crew was installing equipment to cover the event. By her side, Nathan discreetly held her hand. In the past few months, the relationship between them had blossomed, transforming into a mature love built on foundations of mutual respect and admiration. "Nervous?" he asked, noting her contemplative expression. "A little," admitted Sarah. "It's the first time I'll speak in public since the accident." Nathan smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "You'll shine, as you always did in the classroom." The ceremony began punctually at 3 in the afternoon. The audience was a colorful mixture of local residents, volunteers, families of children who regularly visited the sanctuary, journalists, representatives of environmental NGOs, and even some politicians attracted by the growing notoriety of the project. When it was time for Sarah to speak, Nathan positioned her wheelchair at the center of the improvised stage. A spontaneous round of applause erupted from the audience, making her blush. "A year ago," she began, her clear and firm voice carrying to the most distant corners of the field, "I was trapped not only to this chair, but to a life without purpose, without hope. I believed my story had ended on the day of the accident that took away my movement." She paused, looking at the attentive faces gazing at her. "Today, I understand that that wasn't the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but for every animal that has found refuge here, for every child who has learned about compassion visiting this place, for every volunteer who has discovered the transformative power of care." Her gaze found Tempest, who was grazing peacefully near the tent, as if participating in the event in his own way. Beside him, Hope, the rescued mare, now recovered and healthy. "Oak Ridge Valley is not just a sanctuary for animals," continued Sarah, genuine emotion coloring her voice. "It's a sanctuary for interrupted stories that deserve continuation. It's a reminder that, even when life imposes limits on us, the capacity to begin again remains unlimited." The words flowed naturally, as in the times when she taught. Somehow, she realized, she had never stopped being a teacher. She had just exchanged the classroom for a larger, more comprehensive stage. "Each animal here has a story of resilience. Each volunteer, a story of generosity. And together we are writing a new narrative for this land, a narrative of respect, of harmonious coexistence, of second chances." As she finished her speech, the audience rose in a moved ovation. Children approached with wildflowers. Volunteers held up signs with messages of gratitude. Journalists fired flashes capturing the moment. Among the crowd, Sarah spotted Richard. He didn't approach, keeping himself discreetly at the margin of the celebration. Their gazes crossed briefly. There was no longer resentment, just the silent recognition that both had found peace, each in their own way. Later, when most of the guests had already left, Sarah directed her wheelchair to the enclosure where it had all begun. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, casting elongated shadows over the verdant fields. Tempest approached, as he always did. His muzzle gently touched Sarah's shoulder in a gesture that had become a ritual between them. Nathan observed from a distance, respecting that intimate moment of connection. "Thank you," she murmured to the animal, caressing his shiny neck, "for teaching me that sometimes we need to lose something to find something greater." As if understanding, Tempest softly whinnied. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude flood her heart. Her life had changed irrevocably, but not in the way she had feared. The wheelchair, which once represented imprisonment, was now just a detail in a rich, meaningful existence, full of purpose. The sanctuary would continue to grow, to receive new animals, to inspire new people. Her story, the story of a woman who had transformed abandonment into embrace, despair into hope, would continue to echo through the valleys and mountains of Virginia, as a reminder that endings are never really endings, but doors that open to new beginnings. And on quiet nights when the starry sky stretched infinitely over the farm, Sarah fell asleep with the certainty that, regardless of what the future held, she was no longer alone on her journey. She had Tempest, she had Nathan, She had the sanctuary.